Hello, and welcome to another episode of Northstar Talks Politics. I hope you folks are well, that you are taking care of each other, being kind to yourselves. So today I wanted to briefly talk about a few things. First of all, the hacker collectivist Anonymous has teased a 4th of July week. It'll be interesting to see what ends up being talked about, what they end up releasing. I mean, I have no direct access to their stuff, but information as a way of disseminating, and there'll probably be YouTube videos about it. There'll be stuff all over the internet. So, um, if it's as big as they claim, I'm sure governments will try and censor it. But we'll see how effective that is. That does bring me to a topic I wanted to briefly talk about, and that is that corruption has become routine in our world today. Um, People turn a blind eye to it. They get partisan. You know, when in American politics, when you talk about party, the Democratic Party, Democrats will clam up and refuse to hear it. When you talk about Republicans refuse to hear it. People have politicized the truth and choose to live in a bubble rather than the facts. But as the the teaser for that week talks about, something is very deeply wrong with our system. They probably won't correctly identify the cause, but corruption is ultimately a result of the concentration of wealth at the top, of billionaires having enormous wealth and power, and bribing government officials, uh, this leading to downstream corruption, um, if you will. They bribe people and they fund organizations, then turn bribe people, and um, creates a world where you have intelligence services doing vile things like Mossad and so forth, and CIA, and countries' leaders, because you get deeply corrupt assholes like Macron or Trump or Clinton. Uh, these pricks in turn further corruption. I mean, when you have corrupt leaders, people under them end up corrupt. And I'm sure people will dispute any of that. And some are worse. Trump is obviously one of the most corrupt leaders the United States has ever had. But we live in a system where both parties are deeply corrupt. Both parties are billionaire funded in the United States, and third parties are not allowed to get off the ground. I've talked before about how we need electoral reform. We need proportional representation, ranked choice voting, because we have to crush the two-party system. But let me be clear, that won't fix things on its own. It's going to take mass protests. It's going to take a move to socialism. People need to realize that you can't have billionaires and democracy side by side. Sooner or later, either democracy will crush the billionaires, which is what socialism entails, democratic socialism. I'm not a Marxist Leninist, but you do need to nationalize the large corporations, break them up into workers' cooperatives, or put them under local, state, and town control as appropriate. You can have networks of cooperatives and networks of local ownership. I mean, the Mondragon Corporation is actually a network of workers' cooperatives based in the Basque region of Spain, with extensive operations in both Spain and France, southern France, and that is a great example of such a type of organization that much of the world economy could be organized into if we so chose. Um, People think scary socialism, Soviet Union. That's Marxist Leninism, and yes, many of the world's socialists are Marxist Leninists, probably a large majority. That does not mean that's the right way to do socialism. It also doesn't mean that necessarily that's a dead end. Marxist-Leninist countries can reform into better systems. Cuba has, after the death of Castro, reformed into a more open and free socialist society that's moved away from the complete domination of the Communist Party. It's allowed for referendums to hold a lot more weight. I don't think you can argue that democratic referendums on the law are somehow undemocratic. They're the most pure form of democracy. um, which resulted in Cuba reforming its laws and its constitution to end the oppression of gay people and to create a much pro-LGBTQ uh, laws and constitution, for instance. That was one of the things that happened shortly after they opened the system up to a lot more referendums and made it easier to do constitutional amendments and such. But capitalism is literally killing our planet. You have ExxonMobil that covered up global warming for decades after they learned about it in the 1970s, early 70s. And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is proven fact at this point that they did a cover up and a campaign to spread disinformation and uh, climate skepticism and all this nonsense. And you still have people who believe global warming is some kind of fraud today. That is the conspiracy theory, is believing that global warming, that climate change is not real. It's absolutely a verified fact. You have incredible levels of government secrecy, because when the government only works with the billionaires, secrets are important more than under socialism, where the government works for the people. Um, and billionaires are very secretive, so that secrecy just tends to be copied, if nothing else. Billionaires are constantly spying on each other, something we forget, engaging in all sorts of semi and legal and illegal activities that they get away with. We all know what's happening just because it can't be proved or because they settle outside of court when they do this stuff, or gentlemen's agreements not to file lawsuits against each other because it would do more damage to each other than they would gain in revenge. Doesn't mean that it's not happening. You don't get $1 billion by honest means. Uh, Anonymous is decentralized, and they don't have a centralized set of goals, so they're all over the place. They do different things different years. So there's really no telling what they're releasing their 4th of July leaks, because, I mean, even prior actions are no precedent with them, because, again, they're a highly decentralized organization. Um, I don't know. Oh, this computer stuff is kind of a foreign language to me, but I've never been great with programming or any of that. But I gather that they operate through the dark web and all these, like, I don't know what, IRC chats and something. I'm showing how little I know here. Uh, they will definitely be doing something. I'd be interested to see if it's the bombshell they tease. But what is clear is the system needs to change. We have genocides, multiple genocides going on in the world right now. One in the Congo, Eastern Congo. It's actually being carried out by Rwanda, a country which some of you know was the victims of the Rwandan genocide, and then the victims became the victimizers, and they've turned around and committed genocide in Eastern Congo against some of the ethnic group that had been responsible, that on the perpetrating end of the Rwandan genocide, because there was a certain group that was mainly the perpetrators and a different one that mainly was the victims. And a lot of the people associated with that ethnic group, especially leaders, but even ordinary civilians, fled in fear to Eastern Congo after the Rwanda genocide, which has led Rwanda to carrying out a genocide in Eastern Congo, targeting not just that group, but a lot of innocent bystanders, because, among other things, the United Kingdom has gotten involved and helped to fund it. And the U.S. has backed them up with logistical support in exchange for, cheap access to various rare minerals and gold and such coming out of Eastern Congo, uranium in particular. Uh, just like their blood diamonds, there's basically blood uranium comes out of the Eastern Congo. And yeah, hatred has blinded these people, and resentment, and that sheds a little bit of light on why Israel is committing genocide today. They're doing it because hatred and rage and resentment over the Holocaust, obviously. And this is just a repeating motif. Obviously, it's generations past, and actually many Holocaust survivors condemn the actions of Israel, but there's a kind of collective group rage. And this leads, I think, to the hatred of people like Netanyahu, although he's actually suffering. The Israeli opposition is getting very loud and vocal about how what is happening as crime against humanity at this point. So there's a resistance inside Israel. People claim it's some sort of anti-Semitism to criticize Israel. Then what about the Israeli opposition? And what about the Jewish Voices for Peace and other groups like that in the United States and throughout the world who are Jewish people standing up against the genocide? The fact is that was never an attempt at anything but to silence dissent. And I'm sure that groups like the CIA and MI6 are running wild over privacy laws right now, trying to find what this anonymous group is going to release and if it's as big as they say, and trying to stop it because they're very much on the side of the bourgeois state. They're on the side of the billionaires. And by the way, bourgeois, it's a scary word. It's a buzzword. It means billionaires. High bourgeoisie technically is the appropriate term to distinguish from the petty bourgeoisie, who are small business owners. Marx often distinguished in his writings. And as I've said, I'm a Marxist. I'm not a Marxist-Leninist. Some people put up Lenin's writings like the works of God or something, and they've kind of slotted him right into the place where many people slot religion. But some people treat Marx the same way, but they had valuable insights. And capitalism is indeed a horrendous system that is causing immense suffering. That doesn't mean that they have the perfect solutions to it, but it should serve as inspiration for people pushing away from it. And maybe we could have new philosophers, new Marxists, new political scientists who may lead us to a better way of replacing capitalism than Marx, or perhaps just implement Marx's ideas and ideas of some of the other great thinkers like Gramsci better, because Gramsci was a Marxist, something many people forget. They talk about Gramsci's critiques in Dieter and such, and they're somehow unaware that Gramsci was a communist. Though he wasn't always, he was a little bit cynical about Lenin's ideas. He was definitely a Marxist. There's zero question about that. And he was associated with the Communist Party of Italy very strongly, although he had his differences with them. But, perhaps there'll be new thinkers who will help us refine and improve, but we do have to move away from capitalism. That's scary words to people who've been brainwashed and propagandized, but it's necessary. I do hope that whatever Anonymous releases, that it destabilizes the dictatorial control of the billionaires over everything in society. How we have these so-called democracies, they're really oligarchies controlled by the very rich, the United States, Germany, France, etc. It doesn't matter what the people want. The ruling politicians do their own thing, and they do it on behalf of the billionaires, because the politicians aren't really the top dogs. They are lackeys to the truly powerful billionaires, large corporations, etc. And even the billionaires don't really have much choice in the matter. Let's be clear. Capitalism forces them to act a certain way if they wish to survive. They can go class trader, but unless they happen to get very lucky, be in a position where they can change a lot, sometimes politicians stand up to them. FDR famously has been said to have been a class trader, although he said that his greatest achievement was saving capitalism, so I'm not sure that's really true. I said it myself that he was, class trader, but maybe the good kind of class trader, the rich person betraying the rich to do what's right for most people on Earth. But what's clear is that concept can exist, and maybe who knows, maybe George Soros really is a good guy. I doubt it, but I'm sure that some of them have crises of conscience and will try and occasionally turn against the system, but we're not going to get change in the world just from an occasional billionaire turning against his own class. People have to develop awareness of these issues. They have to protest and organize and form socialist parties. And it can't be one socialist party. The Lenin's theory of democratic centralism is nonsense, because socialists can't agree on what the right way to do things are, because there are legitimate differences between different groups of socialists. If you try and do everyone into one party, you end up with a one-party state if socialists attain power, and that's dangerous and undemocratic, and that's what the Soviet Union had, and that's why it failed. Not because of socialism, because it was a one-party state. People have trouble distinguishing between the two in their head, because they're uneducated about politics because they want to oversimplify and because they don't really want to dig in because it's hard and scary. But most of the time, nothing's going to happen to you for learning these things. It's not dangerous to learn it, and while it can be dangerous to speak out, at least loudly, many people talk with their friends, their family, their whispers of things. Even when ideas are suppressed, even when the government tries to hunt you for being a socialist, which, as has happened before, the Indonesian genocide was over 1 million socialists killed by the U.S. puppet dictatorship in Indonesia. Hunted down anyone who had left ideas. Even when that happens, it did not exterminate socialism in Indonesia. It still exists to this day. You cannot kill an idea. And thankfully, that kind of thing hasn't been repeated too many times in history. Although it's one of the genocides the U.S. has on its conscience, but more often the U.S. actually does genocides for natural resources, like in Guatemala, where U.S. aid supported the Guatemalan genocide and the murder of many of the Mayan people. They did it through logistical support to the police that were helping to carry out the genocide in Guatemala. They most certainly did not help any of the people who were fighting back against genocide, and they did not call attention to human rights abuses. The USAID also sponsored a guy who went around teaching torture in Uruguay and Paraguay and such until he was abducted by Marxist guerrillas and executed. They had meant to do a prisoner exchange, but in the end, they ended up executing him. When it became clear they weren't going to be able to do that. I'm not condoning that, but I'm saying that it's very clear that U.S. aid was vile. And while Trump got rid of it for all the wrong reasons, sayonara to an organization with a sordid history, perhaps it can be replaced by something better when Trump's gone, because nobody lives forever. He'll die of old age or a heart attack. He doesn't eat right. His love for McDonald's will catch up for him in the end, I'm sure. Unfortunately, then we'll have J.D. Vance, but, Vance might not be able to organize the masses behind him the way Trump was. He might turn out to be too unpopular and lose re-election. There are more elections in the U.S. And then maybe we bring something back that's better than USAID was. But that's only going to happen if people rise up. If they demand, it can't be the first thing that happens. Happens right away. Democrats do it. It'll just be another corrupt organization. The first thing that happens is people need to demand change the electoral system. They need to demand proportional representation and ranked choice voting for the presidency. Proportional representation in the House, ranked choice voting for the presidency and the Senate, because if we don't get third parties breaking into U.S. politics, we'll never have change. Right now, third parties act as a spoiler. If you vote for the Green Party, you may be handing victory to the Republicans when the Democrats would have won if you voted for them, that kind of thing. That spoiler effect. The system is rigged against third parties, and that's not even talking about gerrymandering, which is a very blatant form of election rigging. It's undemocratic. Politicians aren't chosen by voters. Politicians choose their voters, and they draw these squiggly lines. I don't think that's all controversial to say that's blatantly undemocratic and should be illegal. And often is nowadays, if you can prove it's happening. There have been Supreme Court cases in state Supreme Courts that have ruled it illegal and forced states to redraw their lines, but it still happens. Just more subtly and, well, actually maybe not so subtly right now, but it waxes and wanes, but it's not a problem that's completely gone away, is the point. And there's other forms of voter suppression and other activities that basically amount to stealing elections, even though it's not, nobody's stuffing ballot boxes or something. But when you say have police trying to intimidate people out of showing up at the polling stations, which happened in Georgia, same place that the state Supreme Court ruled that they were blatantly gerrymandering. I think it was Georgia, or was it North Carolina? Also, I think, yeah, it definitely happened in North Carolina, but I think it happened in Georgia too. I'd have to double check. But it doesn't matter the particular state. And both parties do it. The Democrats famously did it in Maryland for a long time. They gerrymandered the frick out of Maryland to maintain more of a predominance of power in safer seats than they should have been able to have, even though the Maryland electorate actually would tend to go Democratic. But there would have been more red seats in the state without gerrymandering. And it would have been a less secure grip on power, so the Democrats cheated. just as the Republicans cheat with gerrymandering. It may be legal, but that doesn't mean it's right, and that doesn't mean it's fair, and that doesn't mean it's democracy. What's legal and what's right are never the same thing. Just remember that, especially with these anonymous hacks coming out. While they've obviously done things that aren't or that are questionable, um, the media, the corporate media, will try and, if it's big, will try and overemphasize the legal methods and underemphasize whatever bombshells are released about corruption that might be legal, but is deeply, deeply wrong. I don't condone what they're doing, but I do say that that doesn't mean that the information they release is necessarily without merit either. Because if someone's has offshore bank accounts and is taking bribes the way that the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers showed, for instance, that's illegal. It doesn't matter if the methods obtaining it were illegal and you can't use it in a court of law. Clearly, those people are corrupt. Clearly, something wrong is happening. All right, well, that's been my talk. I've tried to keep it shorter so that I won't lose too many of you. So I wish you all the best. Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves, and may you always find a guiding star to lead you home. Adieu.